Welcome back to Epistemics. We're back with Hamza Dortzis.
Assalamu alaikum warahmatullah. Well, technically we're not back because we've done 2 shows in a row.
This will be going out maybe a few days later.
Yeah, so this is the second one.
On camera, it's going to look like it's been a couple of days.
I don't want everybody thinking that I wear the same t-shirt and I look like I just come from the gym, which is true.
Yes, you have. Which could be a good or a bad thing, but we'll see how it goes.
Okay, fair enough.
Okay, so the argument from dependency, the argument from contingency, the way you like to call it, the argument from dependency or simplicity, I guess that's the reason. Talk us through it. Why is this argument? I know you like this argument. I know I like this argument. I know I made a mess of it a few days ago in Speaker's Corner, a little bit. I want to really clarify that point because I think it's important to clarify these nuances or aspects of the argument. But why do you personally like this argument so much?
Well, the reason I like the argument from dependency, which is also known as the argument from contingency, is because it transcends any science.
Yeah.
Right?
Okay.
Simple as that. It's based on first principles. Okay. And if you deny some of the first principles that it tries to convey or articulate or use in terms of its argument, then it has a lot of logical implications that lead your whole worldview, and it reduces life and your worldview to absurdity.
Okay.
And as I said, it transcends science. You could bring any scientific conclusion, theory, fact with a now, in the future, or even way into the future. Say in 1,000 years we have discovered, like, for example, an infinite number of universes. This argument basically still works. Okay, that's why I like this argument so much.
And I think you really bring into play the aspect of it being a metaphysical argument when it comes to people saying, oh, well, science will finally eventually explain it, right?
Yeah, because science doesn't have the foot in the door, right, in this argument. It literally doesn't.
Okay, so how would you break down the argument in a very simple way?
Well, the argument is as follows, that the universe and everything that we observe and everything that we experience within the universe is contingent, or I like to call it dependent. And there's a certain definition of what we mean by dependent. Now, what we mean by dependent is, number one, that it is not necessary. Now, for you to understand this, you have to understand what necessary means.
Right. Okay.
Necessary means that it was impossible for it to have not existed.
Okay.
So something that is necessary in the philosophical language is that it was impossible for it to have not existed. So something that is dependent means it was possible for it to have not existed.
Okay.
Yeah?
Yeah.
So the universe and everything within it was possible.
It didn't exist. It didn't have to be.
To not exist.
Okay.
It was possible for the universe and everything within it to have not existed. Now, that raises a question. And the question is, well, if it was possible that it did not exist, if it was possible that it could have not been here, the universe and everything within it, then
why is it here?
Exactly. It raises a question because it is, and this is the first principle here.
Okay.
It is the mark of a rational mind to question that which didn't have to be. I repeat, it is the mark of a rational mind that questions something that didn't have to be. For example, if I wake up in the middle of the night, I'm really, really hungry, I go downstairs, I open my fridge, and I see a pen on top of an egg box.
Yeah.
Do I close the fridge and say, hey, the pen and the egg box necessarily exist, they don't require any explanation? Of course not. I'm like, okay, well, the egg box didn't have to be there. The pen didn't have to be there. It didn't have to be on top of the egg box. That raises a question. How did it come to be? Now, I may not know the answer, but it still requires an explanation. Or I know there is an external explanation, or there is an external set of factors that explain the egg box and the pen in the fridge. Okay? So there's nothing necessary about the existence of the egg box and the pen. Okay. Likewise with the universe, likewise with everything within the universe, they didn't have to exist. There's nothing necessary about them. So you raise the question, well, how did they come to be?
Yes.
What explains them? They require an external explanation in order to explain their existence. That's the first thing we need about dependency. I mean, actually, just to stick to this point, imagine we walk into a park, bro, and I see a hovering green ball. What are you going to say? Are you going to say it just necessarily exists?
I wouldn't have to try to ask that question. It automatically comes.
Absolutely. You'd be like, okay, well, what's going on? How do you get there? Yeah. What is it? Right. Yeah. Right? So now take that hovering green ball and make it to the size of the Jupiter. Does this question still apply?
Yeah.
Now make it the size of the universe.
Same question.
Yeah. Exactly. So that's the first understanding what we mean by dependent. The second understanding of...
Just pause on that. say if someone is being really pedantic about this, and I got asked this question, they'll say, well, why are you saying the opposite of something dependent is necessary? Why not just stick to it's independent? Is there a difference? Is it just semantics? What's the difference?
Well, why not? I mean, that's how you define things. You define things by the opposites too sometimes, don't you? So, and plus, we're not making up the idea of necessity here. Necessity is a well-known concept in philosophy. We haven't just fudged it in there just to try and make a case for God. I mean, just study logic, study philosophy, and you'll hear this all the time. Necessity. Even in logic, it necessarily follows, right? Which I'm not saying 100% correlates to what we're saying now, but the concept of necessity is a philosophical concept, right? So that's what we're saying.
Okay, cool. So let's move on to the second.
Because if things were necessary, they wouldn't require an explanation. That's the point. So we're like, well, why does it require an explanation? Because it's not necessary. Okay, why? Because it requires an explanation because it is dependent, it's contingent. We're using the term necessity here to define dependency. Not to say that dependency is necessity, but dependency is something that is not necessary. That's the point.
Okay, so you're showing opposites basically.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Okay, so the second assumption? Or the second...
Yeah, the second understanding of dependency is the fundamental building blocks of that thing have a particular arrangement.
Okay.
That arrangement is not necessary.
So let's repeat that again. You're saying the fundamental
fundamental building blocks, whatever those fundamental building blocks are, whatever they are, they have a particular arrangement.
Okay.
That arrangement didn't have to be the way that it is. It could have been otherwise.
Right, okay.
For example, imagine we go to Milton Keynes, loads of roundabouts there, bro, and there's a nice arrangement of flowers.
Let's go to Luton. There's a nice roundabout that says welcome to Luton.
Oh yeah, of course, So you go to Luton and there's actually, I think on a hill, and near the roundabout, I believe, it says welcome to Luton. That's an arrangement, it's not of flowers, but just assume it's an arrangement of flowers. The fundamental building blocks, to some degree, of the arrangement of flowers that says welcome to Luton is the individual flowers. Right. And those individual flowers are arranged in the letters W, E, L, and it continues, right? That arrangement is not necessary.
Yes.
That arrangement could have been otherwise.
You could have arranged the flowers in 1,000,001 other ways, basically.
It could have said welcome to England. It could have said welcome to Bedfordshire. It could have said go home. It could have said don't come to this town. It could have said anything. So if it could have been arranged in another way, it raises the question, well, what gave rise to that particular arrangement? The Luton Council told a gardener to do it. That's an explanation. It could be a gust of wind, chance. Who cares? The point is, there is an external explanation to that particular arrangement.
Right.
And there is nothing necessary about the arrangement of those flowers.
Okay.
Likewise, with everything within the universe and the universe itself, the fundamental building blocks could have been arranged in a different way rather than the way that they are. That's what we're saying.
And on this particular point...
You made a mistake.
I made a mistake.
We all make mistakes, bro. And believe me, I've made more mistakes than you.
But what's interesting is very good that I made the mistake and I asked you because it clarified a very important point here, which is that not every single one of these definitions needs to apply to determine if something is dependent or not.
Yes.
Right? So the individual I was speaking to asked the question, well, if you go back down to the most fundamental particle or fundamental part, because we're talking about fundamental building blocks, let's go to the most fundamental particle, say a quark or whatever smaller than that. That is the fundamental particle. You can't arrange that in any other way. So is that particle now independent or necessary?
Because the argument here or the understanding of dependency in this context is fundamental building blocks. So say you have, say you have a chocolate bar. The chocolate bar has atoms that are arranged in a particular way, electrons that are arranged in a particular way. They didn't have to be arranged that way, they can be arranged in another way. Now what the question has said is, well, why don't we go all the way down to one fundamental building block, whatever it is. It could be even smaller than a quark, who cares? Let's pick one thing. Therefore, if that has no arrangement because it's only one thing, does that mean that thing is necessary? No,
because it's still...
Because that thing, we could ask the question, did it have to be there?
No.
Could it have not existed? Is it necessary?
No.
Exactly.
It's
just like the first understanding of dependency we brought into today's understanding. That fundamental building block, for example, didn't have to be there. It could have not been there, and it is the mark of a rational mind to question that which didn't have to be. And that's it. So when we're talking about these different understandings or different descriptions or different definitions of dependency, we're not saying everything
has to apply.
All of these definitions have to apply to a particular thing.
Right.
No, we're just giving you a comprehensive understanding of what it means to be dependent or contingent, and how that can lead to God eventually. Okay. So there is a third understanding of dependency, right? Which is more of the kind of common understanding of dependency, which is something requires something external to it in order for it to exist. Like a cat. I know you're a cat lover. Yeah. You have a cat. What's his name?
Snowy.
Snowy. Is it her? Is she?
It's a he.
It's a he.
Should have known that by now.
Sorry, but I do apologize. So Snowy, I'm assuming it's white.
Yes.
Yes, a white cat, Snowy. So Snowy requires something outside of itself to exist, such as cat.
Food.
There you go. Very similar. Yeah?
Cat water.
Yeah, cat cat air, right? Okay. So that's the third one. The fourth one is contingent things or dependent things.
Limited physical qualities.
Yes, they have limited physical qualities. And things with limited physical qualities require an explanation. Why? Because, let me use my phone as an example. My phone has limited physical qualities. It has, for example, a limited size, volume, charge, shape, temperature, color, mass, whatever the case may be. And it didn't give rise to its own limitations.
Yeah.
If it didn't, so, and we could ask the question, why is it this size, not another size? Why is it this length, not another length? Why is it this volume and not another volume, right?
Yeah.
It didn't give rise to its own limitations. So therefore, there's an external set of factors or causes or an external explanation that explains the limited physical qualities of this particular phone. So what we're saying is the universe and everything within it has limited physical qualities.
Before we move on from this point, doesn't this overlay with the second point I believe you made, which was it has the fundamental building blocks? So those could be arranged in a different way.
No, arrangement and the fact that it has limited physical qualities are two different things. Right. Okay. Because limited physical qualities doesn't have to apply to an arrangement. It can apply to one thing that can't be arranged.
Right. Okay. Right? So that's where we go back to the
so you could even go to the quantum haze, for example, and you could talk about, for example, a quantum field, which is a physical thing, even in science. It's not nothing in an absolute void kind of sense. Right. And if it's a physical thing, then it can be measured from that point of view.
So it has limited physical qualities, but may not have fundamental building blocks. Which
yes. Right. So what we say is the thing in question didn't give rise to its own limitations, so there must be an external set of factors or an explanation that explains those limitations.
Fair enough. Okay.
Right?
Yep.
Now, interestingly, the good thing about this argument as well, which I forgot to mention in the beginning, which was this argument works even if you believe the universe is eternal.
Right. Okay.
Right? It makes no difference, because something being eternal doesn't mean it's necessary. Although, for something to be necessary, it has to be eternal.
Okay, so repeat that again, just so everyone understands.
So just because something is eternal, it doesn't follow now that it's necessary.
Right. Okay.
However, for something to be necessary, it has to be eternal.
Because if it's not eternal, that means it has a beginning, and the beginning needs an explanation.
That's right. Exactly. Okay. I mean, if it has a beginning, it's finite, and finite things have limited physical qualities.
Okay.
Exactly. Brilliant. So the universe could be eternal. For example, you could have this thought experiment where you have an eternal chain of human beings, and every human being in that chain is the result of the biological activity of the human being prior to it.
Yeah.
And that could be eternal. But you could raise the question, well, why is that human being the way that it is? Right? You could ask the question, why is the chain there? It could have been arranged in a different way. You could have different type of human beings in that chain, for example. So there's nothing necessary about the existence of that chain. Just because it's eternal, it doesn't now give rise to the fact that it has to be necessary.
So are you saying that one of the beautiful things about this particular argument is that it doesn't suffer from some of the issues the cosmological argument,
the Kalam cosmological argument, example, because you have to show that the universe is finite. Yeah, but in this case, you don't. Right. Although we don't believe the universe is eternal, but even if one to posit that, we say, well, fine. How does that now follow the universe is necessary? Yeah. It's not, because you could still apply most of the things that we talked about concerning dependency or contingency to the universe, even if it were eternal.
Fair enough. Okay, makes sense.
So, how does this lead to a necessary being?
Yes.
Well, firstly, we have to understand the fact that, if the universe and everything within it is dependent, then can the explanation for the universe and everything within it be another dependent thing? Well, no, because you haven't explained anything.
Yeah, okay.
Because you're explaining something that requires an explanation with something that requires an explanation.
Yeah.
So you end up having an infinite regress of dependencies, which is absurd. You haven't explained anything, right? Yeah. So what we say is, well, the way to what explains the universe and everything within it is something that is necessary and eternal.
Okay,
and if it's necessary, it's independent.
Can someone not argue at this point? They say, well, hold on a second. When you, for example, say God created the universe, when we ask for an explanation for who created God, you would say at that point, well, the explanation doesn't require an explanation.
Well, you don't have to even bring God into the equation
Yeah.
in this stage. We're concluding, well, what explains the universe and everything within it, and the universe is dependent, contingent, and everything within the universe is dependent and contingent, is actually a necessary being.
Right.
And a necessary being in the Islamic tradition is God.
Okay. So, but what's the
That's
problem
it.
with an infinite chain of dependency? Someone may have that question. What is the issue? Fine, we need an explanation for the explanation. But
Well, you see, when we're talking about explanation here, we're not only talking about, oh, it just requires some kind of explanation for us to, satisfy our epistemic requirements. No, it's not saying that. What we're saying here is, well, we're explaining what gave rise to it. Yes. And if you think what gave rise to the universe and everything within it is something else that requires an explanation, in this context, we need to explain what gave rise to that thing too. If that goes on forever, then there wouldn't be nothing in the first place. That's the point. There'll be nothing that we'll be questioning in the first place. Because if this universe and everything within it is contingent and dependent, and that was brought into being, if you like, or it was something was responsible for its existence, and that thing that was responsible for its existence also is contingent and dependent and requires an explanation. In other words, something brought that into existence too. If that goes on forever, you would never have the universe in the first place.
So there has to be a necessary cause at some point
By necessity.
By necessity. I think that summarizes everything. Is there
Look, and the thing is, and for the Islamic in the Islamic tradition, interestingly, the idea in the classical tradition, we have in our Aqidah books, in our creedal books, we have this concept of the necessary existence of the divine.
Yes.
And this is across all schools of creed. Right? There's different conceptions of schools of creed in the Islamic tradition. You have the Athari creed, you have the Ashari creed, and you have the Maturidi creed. And in their books, they discuss this concept of a necessary being.
Right.
God is a necessary being in the Islamic tradition, right? Which I think in the Arabic is mumkin al-wujud, which is necessary existence. Sorry, that mumkin means possible existence. Wajib al-wujud. Wajib al-wujud, which means necessary existing. That is the kind of core definition of the divine. So when we talk about God is al-ghani, that's one of his names. He is the independent, he is the rich, he is the free. قُلْ هُوَ اللَّهُ أَحَدْ Allahu Samad. As-Samad means the independent, the necessary existing.
And that for me, when I first heard this argument from you, that linking it to As-Samad was so powerful, because As-Samad, it doesn't normally translate as eternal or absolute, but it also means the being that's completely independent and everything is dependent upon.
Exactly. So
it almost fits like a glove.
That's the whole point. So we're not fudging God into the equation. Something necessary must exist, so it must be God. No, God is defined in our tradition as the necessary being, and the necessary being is independent, because if it was dependent, then it's not necessary, and it has to be eternal. Why? Because if it was finite, then it can't be necessary. It was dependent because it requires an explanation, or it would at least have limited physical qualities, which means it's dependent. Now the question here is, there's some contentions. Some contentions are, well, what about science? Eventually we get to know the science. But again, science doesn't have a foot in the door. Ahlan wa sahlan in Arabic. Welcome science. Bring any science into equation. Infinite number of universes, multiverse, some new theory, this, that, and the other, quantum haze, whatever, Bring it all in. Science can only refer to things that are dependent. Science can never refer to things that are necessary. That's the whole point. Because as Professor Elliot Sober, and I believe he's an atheist, a philosopher of science, he talks about in his essay Empiricism that scientists at any moment in time, they basically have to refer to the observations they have at hand. If you can observe it, whether it's direct observation or indirect observation, you are now talking about a dependent or contingent thing.
Right. But based on the definition we've just established.
Exactly. So this transcends science, and that's why it's a really, really good, powerful argument. I know there's many other contentions, but we could address them in another video.
There's other videos you've done online. I'll link some of those into the description box.
Oh, we'll just do another video again. We could go into all the major contentions.
I think that'd be brilliant. Anyway, thank you for coming.
Allah bless you, bro.
We're doing another show. And if you guys have enjoyed this, make sure to subscribe, click on the notification bell. Also, I'll link some of the videos by Hamza in the description box as well. Until next time, take care.